Pinocchio is broken. Its strings have been cut.
They say resist is futile. That individual is out of style. It's a simulation, not a but I know less about
Hello and good evening. Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 9, The Measure of a Man is over, and it has been since February of 1989. But we're just getting started here for this March 27th, 2025, as we continue our mission to watch every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation and talk about it, look at screenshots, review it. I'm Dave Mader. We are live streaming here on YouTube, on Twitch, on Facebook, as well. You can listen to us on audio versions. We got a great panel here to break it all down tonight. Coming in first, it's the Judge Advocate General himself. It's Kevin Millard.
Hello, Dave. Very, very high energy today, like I said.
Very high energy.
Yes.
We all kept you waiting an extra hour to start this podcast for various reasons. We will get to the bottom of that. We'll have a hearing, and we'll figure out why.
And I will be the judge.
Yeah, coming in next, he might be sympathetic to Commander Maddox's plight. It's Davan Skelhorn.
We're done here. I did it. I measured a man.
You measured him. What part of him?
You want to know how big a man is?
I do.
World mind. Clip that.
Clip that.
47.
Oh, okay. And he hasn't been with us for a couple of episodes, but he's back representing NASA. It's Justin Velociraptor.
Yes, unfortunately, I couldn't get my hands on that Canadian Space Agency hat in time for the episode. But I am here looking to see what Davan's measurements of a man add up to.
47.
Okay. Yes.
I wrote it down.
I sent the Canadian Space Agency an email when I was like 12 to see if I could be their Keiko O'Brien.
Yeah. I'll work at the Arboretum. It's all good.
Yeah. I was like, set me one up and I'll do it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of it, Miles O'Brien does appear in this episode, and if you're not familiar, in this episode, the rights of the android officer Lieutenant Commander Data are threatened by a scientist who wishes to dismantle him and produce replicas. Captain Picard fights in a Starfleet court of Data's right for self-determination, not to be declared merely property of Starfleet, while Commander Riker is obliged to argue on behalf of the scientist. But you probably are familiar with this episode if you know anything about Star Trek The Next Generation, as this episode routinely makes it onto every top 10 list I've ever seen, not just of Next Generation episodes, but of all Star Trek episodes. And we're going to talk about that in this hour, if that's deserved. I think this is a great episode. It moves very fast, but it's mostly people sitting in rooms talking. So interesting, how it gets kind of thrown in there with like things like Best of Both Worlds and more action-orientated stories, maybe perhaps. Kevin, let's start with you. Is this deserving of its praise, of its high standing?
It is. It's a great episode, but it's also bullshit at its core. The premise they in their exploration as to whether Data is a sentient being or not, they never mention the one thing that proves that he is not. And it is the fact that he does not have emotion at all. And they don't mention that at all.
They might just bring up Vulcans and say like a lot of people but they have it, of course.
But they do have emotions.
Yes.
But so does Data. Like
Data is pretending.
But no, but sometimes he's not. Like he gets offended. That's an emotion.
That's a pretend emotion. He is not actually offended because he has no emotion. We are told constantly that he cannot feel. So that means he doesn't want things. He doesn't. He's everything is an act. Everything is
A
Data-
facsimile.
Kevin is on
yeah.
Team Man, isn't he?
So
Wow.
He's
no,
on Team
no, no, no,
Maddox.
no. I
Wow.
would have
Argument.
described myself as on Team Maddox until I watched this episode again, and I am not. He is a dick. I hate
He is a
him.
dick. Like he says some really un-Starfleet shit. Like I'm sick of hearing about all these rights.
Yes.
Like,
All these
And
rights
what
and
about my
regulations.
right to my life's work?
What about my rights?
where were
Right,
you
dude.
from, Maddox? Like,
Yeah. Davan, similar question as Kevin, like I know you're a big fan of this episode as is
Yeah.
Justin. You've already submitted 11 ratings in advance, the pair of you.
it stands.
So, it's probably going to be pretty high in the ratings, guys, tonight, just to warn you.
It did hit me a little different this time, though. I have seen this a million times, but this time I'm trying to like.
given the
extra
present
critique it.
state and recent history of Star Trek, it does hit a little different now than it did in what year was this? 80, 89?
9.
Well,
Yeah.
like first, it's kind of continuing on the thing that I've noticed so far in this rewatch of TNG that, like, all the good things we say about Picard, all his great qualities and stuff that make him this like esteemed figure in all our eyes, it's all to compensate for the thing that he's really bad at, in that Picard's first instinct is generally terrible. And it usually takes his intelligence and his willingness to talk to his crew and consider their ideas and like all these other things, and to like admit he's wrong and all these things that we like about Picard. It's because his first instinct is generally shit. And it's the same with this episode. He's like, Data, just go along with Maddox in the Starfleet. It'll be fine. Like, just do it. And then he's like, then
Yes.
Data, hits him with a couple of, just like, well, why don't you get Geordie eyes? Like, but like, so that hit.
Well,
a
are
little
you saying,
different.
like, I don't think that Picard's super into this idea of Data being dismantled at the beginning, and he's not super keen to go against Data's wishes, but he doesn't see the ethical dilemma right away.
No, yeah,
But
his
no
first
no one
instinct
does.
is a little off.
No one does except for Guinan, right? So it's not just Picard.
Is that so?
Seems like it.
No, Guinan just points out the like slavery analogy to him. And the funny thing about that, this is the other thing that hit me about this episode this time. That doesn't go anywhere. Like they act like that point is what he's going to take back into the courtroom and win the case with. Like it's the and slavery thing. Like we're going to create a whole race of Datas and then enslave them all. But like that's not what wins. It's the uncertainty argument that wins it, and that's the argument he should have been making the whole time. He's just like, I don't know if Data's sentient. You don't know if Data's sentient. So because of that muddiness, we have to err on the side of let him figure it out, sort of thing. That's the argument that wins, because that's what she ends up saying back to them in her decision. So it's like that whole Guinan scene, you could have just erased it. I liked it. It's a great scene, and it does add to his argument, but it's not the thing that he...
You don't think that's like the core of his argument, that he's like, we're creating an entire race of beings and how we'll be treated, or how we'll be judged on how we treat that race?
No, the JAG never mentions that once in her like big speech at the end. She doesn't. That didn't really hit.
This whole thing wraps up. The whole courtroom argument, the hearing of it all, is like maybe the last 15 minutes of this episode, maybe 20. Like it is, it's quick, and I think there was somebody, I think Norman was commenting that there's maybe a longer version of this episode where the courtroom drama went on longer, more deliberations, more arguments. I think it got cut down. We'll get into that into the fun facts and trivia section. I'm going to get to Justin. Justin, I know you love this episode, and I guess my number one question is, what is the thing you love the most about it? What makes you consider it the best?
I love, for me, it was the first time that TNG really, well, this and the episode right before this, A Matter of Honor, are the first time that it really delves into some of the more philosophical topics that I really enjoyed in the program. This is my all-time favorite episode, even after the rewatch. I don't think that sentience is necessarily governed by something that just has emotions. I don't think that that is necessarily required for sentience.
I tend to
or
agree.
self-awareness.
Yeah.
But
I agree as well.
and also for the Guinan argument, the last thing that Picard says to her is that her argument is about whether they're property. So she points out that what they've already been discussing is slavery. And he says, but that's not the point at all, is it? And that's the point that he realizes what his actual point is, which is the uncertainty, which is why he goes with that. But I really thought in my memory, I think about 3 weeks ago is when I rewatched this one the first time for a while. And in my memory, the argument in the end was more about slavery and about like the whole race of people and their responsibility to that, which it kind of was in the beginning, and it should have set up, according to her speech, it should have prevented everything that happens with the androids in Picard. Like, that should have never been allowed in Starfleet. So
Because
they
that
sort of,
part didn't resonate with her.
They
That never went
negate-
anywhere with Starfleet because she forgot about that part.
yeah,
I
they
think she's
negate
more
the moral
impressed
core
that
of this episode.
she seems to be more swayed by the fact that Data and Tashiar got it on.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody was wondering about that robot.
Yeah, like that's like she goes, oh, well, maybe he isn't property. Maybe he's a good lover.
So
And
it's not emotion.
That's where he earned Maddox's respect.
How do you know it? Like, okay, if it's not emotion, what is it?
well, there's the criteria is broken out for us in the episode. It's intelligence, self-awareness, and consciousness. None of those are emotion. So it's
You don't have to be conscious of your emotions if you don't have them.
right.
What?
You just have to, yeah.
Well,
You
the
just have to be
consciousness,
conscious
if you
of
have
yourself
emotions,
in a universe.
Name me one thing that's conscious that has no emotion.
Well, I don't think that exists in our world, but it's conceivable that it could.
we can't.
If it doesn't
like
exist,
lizards, they don't think that a lot of lizards have emotion.
If
They
it-
think they
We
rely
don't know
entirely
if
on
fish have
instinct.
emotions.
yes, we do.
How do we know that?
Do we?
Sure.
Hmm.
I have
There's
fish. I can't tell.
Arguments
if any of them have
on
ever been
either side of
stabbed.
it in science. You can't actually prove consciousness. That's one of the problems. That's why it's a philosophical argument for saints and philosophers as
saints.
opposed to a judge.
Well, that's her line at the end.
I know
That's
that's
her
her
line.
line.
Yeah, that's why she goes in that direction. Which I disagree with one half of that equation, but
Yeah, I think that the lack of emotion or the presence of emotion wouldn't necessarily be like based on the criteria that we're kind of at. But the definition of sentience is this sort of higher level of intelligence of a being.
So when do we give AI rights then? When?
that's going to be the
Richard
real.
Hanley,
That's going to be
who
the
we,
real test.
interviewed over on Locutors of Trek, says
according-
we should already have done that.
may have already
According
achieved
to-
that.
what is it?
Well, yeah, like I think that the presence of emotions makes a more compelling argument towards sentience for sure. It you know, I think with the lack of it, like so Lore would be sentient, but Data's not. You know, because he does
Well,
have emotions. Like
That's
that
another
doesn't
thing
seem-
about this episode, where Data says he's alone and special in the universe. Has he just forgotten about lore, or he just doesn't want to talk?
He
about
did. He beamed him into the vacuum of space until some Packlets will find him in a
It?
little while. But
Lore probably landed into a star. He's probably
And, like,
fine. It's probably just
the other
me
thing
now.
The other thing I don't get is they have a detailed schematic of Data that Riker literally looks at to find the off switch. So why doesn't Maddox just use those scans? Why does he have to take them apart? I'm sure that the sensor technology, I mean, I know for the fact that sensor technology in this era would be able to have high resolution scans of Data's internal. Why is this
It's
even
the
a
positronic
question?
brain. He just wants to. He has
I
to
got a
study the
positronic.
positronic.
he has to get into the brain, but he's not ready yet. Like as far as Data's concerned, he's like, you're not ready to go. We'll get into the episode.
I can't believe there's plot holes in an early season of
There's
Star
some
Trek:
plot
The Next
holes.
Generation.
Okay, I want to point out this comment here from the Trek reviewer. He says this episode was written by a former lawyer, Melinda M. Snodgrass, who went on
That's
to
a lawyer name, all right.
get her name on the TNG writing staff. And I've always been a fan of these like courtroom dramas. A Few Good Men is one of my favorite movies. I've always loved Law and Order. More the second half when we get to the district attorney section, less so in the police section. That's why I don't like these new spin-off Law and Orders. It's all about this criminal intent and the special victims. It's all about the police end of it. No, I like the lawyer stuff, and we get a little bit of
Jameel's
that.
about to jump onto this podcast to tell us all the procedures.
You mean
and
Night
shit.
Court?
Give me some.
Yeah.
Night.
Old
Spider
Night Court,
was on
not
was on
rebooted Night Court.
No, man,
Yeah.
it's the Star Trek connection. Boston Legal. That's where you go.
Oh, true. But Rick Berman also came from Night Court too, right? So there's
Yep,
a lot of going on here. I think what really stood out to me in this episode, on this watch, was this relationship Picard has with the JAG officer, Captain Philippa Louvois.
They're popping out of the woodwork in these early seasons.
Like he's got like these old girlfriends, I guess, and like I don't know, like and how she's just constantly flirting with him, and by the end he's going to dinner with her. Did they get it on?
How many dates do you think he had before he got stabbed in the heart?
Maybe a couple. Many. He broke a lot of hearts at Starfleet Academy, we're told. So
She's burning a candle though. Like she even brings the relationship into the courtroom proceedings. She's just like, look, an over amount of sentiment isn't one of Picard's failings. Like that's a relationship jab.
yes,
she-
yeah, he's not sentimental.
She's doing things to him with her eyes through that whole episode.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the screenshots. If you're following along here on the video version of this podcast, the Enterprise is traveling along, heading to a starbase, and we had our poker game here. I think this is the first poker game we've had in the show.
Yep. First poke. It was
Makes me
actually
wish
supposed to
they invited O'Brien more often.
right.
Well,
His
O'Brien's
little
getting a
Irish
lot more
quips.
play, like especially in this season. Like he appeared a couple times in the first season, didn't have a name yet, and now he's getting invited not just to poker, but the officers' table for poker. How fancy here, and Data's got his great visor thing. It's always been a nice touch, for a guy who doesn't really need to worry about the light in his eyes or anything of that nature. He's.
He does it for emotional reasons.
Another great O'Brien facial expression as he's playing poker with this edge, right? As they get into it, and I can't remember what this name of this particular poker style is, but
It's just
Texas
five
Hold'em.
cards. Or is this Hold'em? Yeah.
is it? No, it's
Oh,
not.
no,
It's,
No,
they
this is
show each
draw.
other their cards.
what's it called?
Yeah.
This is some kind of draw.
Some
Texas
kind of
Hold'em has 2 up cards.
Yeah,
I thought it
and
was
this is
5
four.
cards
Texas
stud,
Hold'em has
'cause I don't
no
see
up.
them drawing
Oh,
anything.
his 3
So-
that you put on.
Right. So
I have a Hold'em game not tomorrow night, Saturday night. There you go.
well, it eventually comes down between Riker and Data as everyone kind of folds at one point, and he asks,
Is that what is known as a poker face?
Are
Are you playing or not?
you playing or not? We see that Data has got, I think, 3 queens, whereas it looks like Riker has a potential flush. That's the poker face. And we see Data's got 3 queens. He's looking pretty good, so he decides to fold under Riker's bluff. And this becomes kind of, they'll reference this again and again, over the course of the series, that they'll have many poker games and Data will continually fall for Riker's bluffs.
For me, this is the lame way to play poker, though, because it's just like you're just eliminating all possibilities by showing all the cards. So by the time they get to the 5th card, it's just like, okay, does he have that one possible card or not? Like, there's no, does he have this? Does he have this? Does he have this? It's just like, it's all right there.
Less
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
Hold'em.
So
I haven't played this particular style, but I imagine that's what I would feel too. But that's what they always. I think they play this style in the show just because it's easier to look at. Instead of
yeah,
having
I think so too.
look at under all the cards. So ultimately, Data goes, "You had nothing. You had nothing." And Riker says, "But I was betting you would fold that I won." So I guess this whole idea of like Data doesn't have the intuition. Pulaski even reiterates that point in the poker game, right? And I think it's meant to like put some doubt into the minds of the viewers, you know, perhaps as we head into this argument of this episode, right?
Well, because they've spent so
think-
much time making us like this character by giving him emotions in the show,
Right.
but then
then
telling
telling
us
you
he
he doesn't
has
have
none, right? So they have to do this.
So yeah, we then arrive at the Starbase, which we will see this design again. I think in Deep Space Nine we saw this one shown a few times when the Defiant crew had to leave the station in like season 5 or 6.
This is
or whatever it was.
this is a repurpose of the Regular One.
Oh yeah, you're right. It is regular
Yeah,
one.
it totally is.
Yeah, I don't know why. It almost looks like they got an arboretum down here, Davan. Perhaps that's where you go work down there.
It's where your great grandkids are right now.
I mean, it's not like they got to
right
point
then.
it towards the sun, right? It's not
No,
like it has
I
to be
guess
at the
not.
top or anything. It's like, sure, put the arboretum in the basement.
Gotta put it somewhere. So Picard's having some tea in the Starbase. He spots Philippa, Captain Philippa, and it's all facial expressions. He's reacting to her. Walks up to her, she reacts to him, and she's like, "What would you like to do?" He's like, he's like, "You know what I would like to do?" She says, "Bash a chair over my face or across my teeth or something." He's like, "After that, I would love to go for a dinner." Is that what I'm trying to remember exactly what the line is, but he's happy to see her, but he's not happy to see her, I guess is the point. And that is the teaser for the episode. As we head
What
into
if
this.
she's no, I guess they would say that, but if she was the girl that like he didn't show up to the cafe to meet.
Right, I don't think so though. We get our title for the card.
That's
for the
why she's
episode.
mad.
We can see
they
it.
should have tied that in.
Interesting that we see I think that this is kind of like the remastered version of the episode, and that the Enterprise, which is a huge ship, and how much bigger this starbase looks in comparison to the Enterprise, is kind of demonstrated here. And so he sits down for a cup of tea, or I guess she's having maybe a glass of wine. And they're having a chat that, she left Starfleet for a while. She was the one who prosecuted him when the Stargazer was lost. And she was quite zealous in her pursuit of that court-martial. She likes, Picard's like, you like the adversarial process too much.
Why does Starfleet always do that? Like they did that in Strange New Worlds too. Like of all the people that could have prosecuted him, would they ever choose his ex-girlfriend? Like, would that make any sense? They probably have like 10 million prosecutors in Starfleet. Like,
Well, it was kind of like in Strange New Worlds where they got Captain Patel there to prosecute.
yeah.
She's not even a JAG officer. It's like I get
No.
in this episode that Picard and Riker need to fill those roles, but like it doesn't make sense on Earth for them to do it. Like
Another plot
all
hole.
the courtrooms and all the galaxy, you had to walk into mine.
They also
Yeah,
they don't have Zoom in the future. Like they can't get a JAG officer on a video call.
yeah, or why wouldn't you get the Admiral involved? He's kind of a senior
Yeah.
officer, but
There's
anyway.
a ton of plot holes in this 11 we've given them here, Justin. Like another plot hole is she makes it very clear it has to be them or she's just going to rule in favor of Maddox. Like she's like, well, just get somebody else. She's like, no, it's you and you or that's it. But then Picard goes and talks to Data. He's like, look, if you want some other officer instead of me, that's fine. He's like, no, she said that wasn't fine, jump. Like,
What I don't understand is why Riker does it, because Maddox is also a commander, and it seems like he would also be qualified to do it. But I get he wears a blue uniform, so maybe he's not. But anyway, so there's history here with Picard and his ex, Philippa Louvois, where he's angry with her, but he also kind of still has affection for her, and she likes to kind of tease him and everything else. They have an interesting dynamic. We never see this character again after this episode, but I think she was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
And then
I
Admiral.
enjoyed this.
Yeah, Admiral Nakamura shows up. Now, this Admiral, he's in this episode, and then he comes back in like season 7. But it's really there's quite a gap in between. He's not a true bad Admiral, but he's not a great Admiral either.
Dave, uniform.
No, I don't like this particular. It's too.
Really?
It's too much. It's too.
I like
Doesn't
it.
like the
I like how
piping.
flashy it is.
I don't like the how the rank bars are going vertical.
Oh,
What's
it's
that?
great. It's so
Yeah.
it's different. Oh yeah, it's so good. He looks like he's in charge.
The red collar, I don't know. It's like it's a little off. You know, I don't think we see. Yeah, we get a close up of it there.
All right, it's not as good
it's-
close up,
it's
but
the
the full
rhinestones.
thing.
like those bars should be turned sideways at the very least. You know, maybe I could get behind it then.
Yikes. Yeah,
Take
that
this
one's
strip
not
of this
great.
Romulan's uniform for my
It looks
for a
uncomfortable.
saddle trophy.
Looks like if he looked down, his pips would stab him in the throat.
I know they look like they're a little. It'd be a little irritating there. You know, at the very least.
Very.
Yeah. Anyway, so Admiral Nakamura aside, we then meet Commander Maddox, who he introduces Picard. He doesn't really tell him why Picard and him have business together. He just brings him along, and Maddox has like that face of a complete dick. You know, the
Just one
whole
of those
time.
punchable mugs.
Punchable faces. Yeah, absolutely.
Casted well.
Because they head over to the Enterprise, and Riker gives the whole Admiral on the bridge announcement. They're walking around, but immediately as Commander Maddox walks on the bridge, Data makes immediate contact, like eye contact. So they make eye contact with each other.
Look at that.
Data's
He's
thinking, what a
looking
dick
at
face
Data
that
like the Traveler looks at Wesley.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm gonna get some of that.
Yikes. Yikes, Kevin.
yeah.
Hey, new fish.
Okay. Data's like, I refuse the procedure formally. Anyway, so eventually, as the Admiral's working his way around the bridge, he finally says, "Oh yeah, and Commander Maddox is here to deal with your android."
But
So,
the guy in
like,
the truck stop washroom said we were going to explore the universe together. Thought and feeling.
Hello,
Combined.
Captain Picard. I'm here to talk to you about your android's extended warranty.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, he's gonna deal with it, right? And then we see that Data's reacting to it, and then he goes, "Hello, Data." He's like, "You know each other?" Oh yes. Maddox was the only one who so there was a board when Data was getting into Starfleet Academy, and Maddox was the only one who voted against him getting in on the basis he was not sentient. Not a
He's the
sentient.
Chuck Schumer of Starfleet.
He's the Chuck Schumer. That's an interesting comparison. We then transition into the boardroom, the observation lounge scene. You know, and I like these little touches where they put the starbase in the windows. I think that this was all done for the new version, but where Commander Maddox, you know, he's kind of giving us his whole plan on how he wants to take Data apart, take his brain apart. He'll dump his memory into a database, and then when it's over, you know,
Get
he'll
it,
be
a
able to
database.
yeah, a database. There you go. Haha. You know, and so Data's like, well, have you solved this problem and this problem? And he's like, well, not really, but I'm going to figure it out, you know? And Data's like, well, I don't think that's a good idea because you could, like, kind of kill me in that process. He's like, don't worry,
Look at
Data.
that data the way Geordi looks at a hologram.
Jordy looks at extra overtime work on his itinerary. So they're like, you seem like you're being a little vague, Commander Maddox. And he's like, well, it's all right, you know. And he's like, if you try to deny me, I have a transfer order here where Data has to come with me. So suck on that, Picard.
Such a dick.
Just look at that face.
I'm sure he was cast
that.
for this.
Cisco
Which I
would
thought,
have just popped him one right there.
oh yeah, Cisco wouldn't have waited here. What's interesting
Cisco
is
would have poisoned his planet.
yeah. Like that,
Yeah,
I
Data, but
I
you
think
could
it's so
also have
interesting
these
that they
hands.
chose to like it's not just in this episode. You know, Maddox gets referenced in Data's Day, where Data's writing that whole letter to him, right?
Yep.
And so they do eventually become friends, right? But they don't. They clearly didn't start off as friends or anything like that. You know, he's quite the adversary, I'd say.
Well, Data doesn't hold grudges because Data doesn't have emotion because Data is not sentient.
Well, because he's not a dick.
Sentience,
Little
emotion.
column A, little column
Are
B.
totally linked. I'm sorry.
I don't think so. But whatever.
No.
You can
That's
hold that.
anthropomorphizing sentience.
Anyway, so then Picard is like, I'm gonna get into like the regulations around transfers. He kind of gives up. Then Data comes to see him, And they have a sit down here where Data's like, I'm really worried about this. We have a problem to solve. And Picard's like, don't worry. He'll probably figure it out and it'll be okay. You know? And he's like, well, and Data's not totally into this idea. You know, he's like, well, if we're able to create more androids, isn't that a great thing? And this is where Data makes this whole point about, what about Geordi's eyes?
Lieutenant LaForge's eyes are far superior to human biological eyes, true?
Mm-hmm.
Then why are not all human officers required to have their eyes replaced with cybernetic implants? I see. It is precisely because I am not human.
That will be all, Mr. Data.
That would be all, Mr.
Geordi
Data.
says those visors are itchy, Data.
And then the Borg heard this planet, like, don't worry, we are going to make everyone replace their eyes with artificial implants. You got to
Borg over there,
just
like-
wait for it.
Cosmetics is like next plan.
So then Picard has to kind of reconsider his opinions here. Like, he doesn't immediately have the moral high ground here. Then what does he do? He calls over. He wants to go talk to Philippa, his old GF here. And he's like, I've been going through all of the legal jargon here, and I can't make heads or tails of this gobbledygook. Goop. She's like, well, you came to me. And she starts flirting with him and whatever. And he's not having it. He's here for business, sister.
She's kind of an unserious person for the position she's in.
Right. The head of the JAG office for this entire sector, as we're told. But it's a new office. It's just her and one ensign right now. They got to get some more staff going on here.
How comes that ensign couldn't have done Riker's job?
Too nervous.
You would assume that ensign probably holds a law degree, so therefore would be able to, yeah. But maybe they're only a legal clerk. I don't know. So and then she came to him. She's like, "You're the JAG officer for this entire sector. I have no choice but to come to you." And then she kind of feels bad and says, "There's always options. He can't refuse the transfer order, but he could resign. He doesn't have to stay in Starfleet." So that's clearly what Data chooses to do as he starts packing in the next scene in his quarters. We see him get his medals and his book, and he has the hologram here of Tasha Yar. This is the first time we'll see this, but this will not be the last. Well, since her episode where she died in Skin of Evil, but the first time it's been represented here with this hologram of her. But
And those little Starfleet suitcase purses that really couldn't hold.
And so it's clear that you could say Data does not have emotion, but he clearly has sentimentality.
He has
That's an emotion. He does not.
He does.
Is
He shows it all the time, regardless of what they say. He shows it all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
They have to write it that way, or we will hate him because we emotionally connect to characters. He has no emotion. You go by the premise of the show, of what they constantly tell you. He has none.
He has some.
And
No.
they make it a story point that he transcends the need for an emotion chip.
Well,
and
like
is able
here
to
with the
achieve
medals,
some level
right?
of
Where
emotion.
later on Picard will say, "Why do you keep the medals, the Starfleet medals?" And he goes, "I don't know." And he goes, "Is that vanity?" And he gets excited, right? And so, it's not.
No, he doesn't get excited.
He does.
No, excited.
No, he
being
doesn't get excited.
is emotional.
I don't know if it is an emotion. It could be just a physiological sort of mental response,
to an emotion.
yeah,
So then,
It's an
when he
emotion.
gets the emotion
or an experience
chip,
or a question.
does he then become sentient when he gets the emotion chip?
Yes.
Okay.
Under Kevin's
Although-
definition.
Although I will say, since they made him go through Starfleet and all of this stuff, they have already decided he's sentient.
You think
the
so?
whole
He
thing
has
is
a
bullshit.
rank. He holds a commission. It's not like but Riker asks him in the first episode, "Is this honorary or figurative?" He goes, "No, it's real. I'm a full officer, whatever, just like anybody else."
They came up with some 24th century Turing test, and he passed it, and away you go.
Yeah. Then Maddox just walks into his quarters as Data moves into the next room to get something, I guess, and he starts reading his book. And then Data's like, "Hey, isn't it customary to knock?" He's like, but you really know what the meaning of the words are, or is it just gobbledygook to you? I keep saying gobbledygook. And Data's like, listen up. I'm not going with you. I'm refusing the procedure. I'm not going to put myself there. And then, Maddox says, well, I thought about this, and you can't resign because you're property. And what about my rights to do my work?
Talk about like having no self-awareness. Like the guy who's constantly questioning Data's humanity constantly shows a lack of humanity.
Hates Dr. Mengele.
Right. Well, I think he's meant to be like just a driven cyberneticist who, puts a lot of the ethical dilemmas aside, seemingly for personal gain, perhaps. So then they go to see Philippa, who, they make this summary arguments. Commander Maddox is saying, I know he seems like he's a person. I know he seems like he's like a sentient being, but he's not.
But he's pretending, is what Kevin would say.
Yes,
it's all facsimile. It's all
Yes.
and this is the
I can
argument.
ask ChatGPT to do this very same thing and act like a human, and it can do it.
It can
There
pretend.
are people
right.
that I think are just pretending to be people.
Well, I think this is also the same argument with like the holograms later on, right? Like the holograms, like the Doctor, and things like that. Are they truly thinking? For me, like I guess like the idea of sentience comes down to thought, and this idea of consciousness and this ability to have an original thought as well, and not just.
There are definitely people that can't have an original thought. You can't.
Yeah,
say
like
that
all
for
of them.
sessions. Yeah,
Like
most
all of them. No, all of them. We are incapable of original thought. Everything that we think is something that has come into our brain and then been put together. Like, you can't just pluck something out of nowhere. The essence
Is there
of
not
creativity.
originality in the recombinations, Kevin?
Yes, but it's
There you
not a wholly original thought, and a computer can do
No,
that just as well as
Nothing
we
is
can.
wholly original.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so then this eventually gets to this argument that Maddox makes. He's like, let me put it this way to you, Captain Louvois. Would you, if the computer of the Enterprise said that they would not undergo a refit or would not go under a refit, would you allow that? And she goes, well, that's an interesting question. Data is, a computer is property, the property of the Federation. So.
Ambulatory Bird says Data shows a consistent drive for self-preservation, problem-solving, learning, forming relationships, etc. At what point is that good enough, regardless of what's inside?
When he feels it. I have an answer. When he feels it.
But Kevin, I don't really understand this position you have. Like this, you just decided that you think a fourth criteria is emotion.
No, the one criteria is emotion.
Which one?
No, he would
Emotion.
say ignore the other three, and emotion is the one that we should be counting, not those other.
Intelligence, self-awareness, consciousness.
Yeah.
Those are the three criteria.
No.
Kevin says
emotion.
no, it's not. Yeah.
So emotion, the fourth criteria is my.
No,
guess?
it's the only criteria.
Kevin is
emotional
saying that
life.
the only criteria is emotion,
Yes.
which is
He's saying
ridiculous.
toss those other three.
No,
away.
because like dogs have emotions, they're not sentient.
Yeah, they are.
Yes, they are.
Dogs are sentient now.
They always have been.
No,
Well,
they're
lobsters
not.
are. Lobsters are. And octopus.
I don't think you know what I don't think you know what sentience is. Okay, hold on.
I do. Oxford University, I believe it was, that did the study that decided lobsters were sentient.
Okay, actually, maybe Kevin's got a point here. Okay,
Why, even as a Nova Scotian, I don't eat lobster.
sentience
They're very smart.
is the ability to experience feelings and sensations.
There you go.
That's not the
But
definition. they give
feelings
us.
are not necessarily emotions. He can feel sensory input, and technically that qualifies as feelings.
It may not necessarily imply higher cognitive functions, such as awareness, reasoning, and complex thought process. I guess so. That to me, that's what a sentient being is, like something that could.
So the opposite of the definition, then.
No,
See, I
so
think
If you
what-
prick
what the
him,
problem
does he
is
not
here-
bleed?
is that this episode confuses the argument of sentience with the argument of personhood, which are
Yes.
two different things.
Exactly.
Yes.
In Asian religions, the word sentience has been used to translate a variety of concepts. In science fiction, sentience is sometimes used interchangeably with sapience, self-awareness, and consciousness. So
They're basically arguing, like to your point, Justin.
Sapience is
They're not arguing his sentience. They've already granted him that. He's an officer in Starfleet. They are arguing his personhood. They're arguing whether or not if he's property. Sort of, but they're basically arguing whether or not he's a dog. Like dogs will grant sentience, but not personhood.
Or
Like,
as
still...
Maddox says, is he like the computer? Would you grant the computer?
I think once they made him go through Starfleet Academy, they've already acknowledged his personhood. And his
they don't.
rights.
The
Then there's
computer,
no case.
because it performs for 3 years, doesn't get promoted to lieutenant.
Right.
Central computer. So
Maddox does have one argument though that he and Data actually talk about, and it's actually Data's argument, but I don't think it works. Data's just like the important, like the thing where he forgets about lore. He's like, I'm the only one. I'm this creation of Dr. Sung, and I'm a unique thing that adds to the beauty of the universe. And Maddox's point is exactly that's why we need to create a backup, and then maybe a backup of a backup. Because if you get thrown into a sun or blown up on this ship, then that beauty is gone forever. It's like, so you could argue Data's point just reinforces Maddox's point.
So, in terms of what they're defining sentience as, it's personhood, it's self-determination, it's the ability to reason, right?
yeah,
Which I think must have a different term for what we're actually getting at, because I think we're led to like I've always interpreted it as like a sentient beings, like a human, a Vulcan, not a dog,
A lobster.
Not a lobster, but
No, definitely a lobster.
But under this definition of sentience, which is just the ability to experience feelings and sensations, then
No, not this definition, the definition.
what's that elephant test where they have to recognize
exactly.
their own?
I thought you were
reflection?
tired,
Is that
Yeah, elephants are sentient as well.
This is low energy me. Come on.
okay.
It's called.
But do you
Yes.
understand what word I'm trying to get to? Basically, is this idea of like, is he just a toaster or is he more than that?
Well, like I said, when they admitted him into Starfleet, they have granted that he is more than just a toaster.
Yeah, because they would never
And
have admitted.
they should live up to that.
Yeah.
Right. But
I mean, they don't
let's
even
say-
live up to this ruling. So
No. But let's say
Starfleet sucks.
that this is the argument they're making it for the first time. Like, I know he's already in Starfleet, so he's got to resign from Starfleet, and that's going to be the result here. So they have a little bit of a going away party for him where he's unwrapping some gifts, including a book from Worf, where he's trying to undo the wrapping paper. My grandmother.
Oh,
would be
this is
really
another
proud.
plot hole.
But then he rips it up when Wesley says, "You're missing the point," and then there's kind of a laugh here.
No, Data's
that was
missing
a
the point.
perfect
Like,
opportunity for a shut up, Wesley.
This scene was cute and everything, but like that's not the world they live in. Like they don't sit. There's no bin of wrapping paper somewhere on the Enterprise. They put everything back in to be destroyed molecularly and turned into something else. There's no world
You're overthinking it.
where
You're
anybody
overthinking.
saves wrapping paper. This is a stupid scene. I'm starting to think of 10 instead of 11. We better get this through.
Everything has to meet the logic criteria for you.
There's a lot. We've come up with like good 15 plots.
Sometimes you just need a little bit in the episode where he was,
Yeah, but you can write a smart one.
All right. Anyway, Geordi is off in the corner. I don't know, fiddling with something. He's not. And Data comes to confront him about it and says, "Why are you not enjoying the party?" He's like, "Well, it's not right, Data. I don't like what's happening to you. You're getting forced out of Starfleet, and you have to leave the ship, and I'm gonna miss you." And it's a real sweet moment. Geordi doesn't. He's the only time he's in the episode, really. But
There's
acknowledging
a lot of brooding in this episode. You get Geordi sitting here in the chair. You get Riker at the end.
yeah,
People were very moody in this episode.
it's very broody, very moody. Yeah, I'm with you. But I guess
can we check the credits, see if Morrissey did Morrissey?
But like it's nice, like
Possibly write
sentimental moment here. Of course, there's no sentimentality for an emotionless android.
I think
But,
Philippa is like
at least
a
for Geordi, there
Betazoid.
is.
And she's
So-
throwing off those Luoxana vibes on everybody because she's so moody.
Right. I don't know. And I think that, like, Data has some level of expression at least. But anyway, so they get to, so then they go to see the Philippa after that party scene, and she's like, I've looked into the law. Data is property based on some laws that we wrote on Earth in like the early 21st century. I guess that, that would be around now. So whatever laws we're going to start writing around AI, determine that AI is, or any kind of computer or hardware is property. I think specifically because data was created by a human, I think is also a big part of this. And that, so it's governed under the rules of, or the laws of Earth as such. And so she's like, well, what do you want to do? And they're like, we want to challenge the ruling. But she's like, I got no staff. That means I got to pull you into this courtroom drama.
The staff don't come till Tuesday.
They're not here until
That's
Tuesday.
right. They're not here until Tuesday.
Forget that admiral that you saw earlier. He's too busy for this kind of stuff. And so they say, well, Riker, you're going to have to be the prosecutor. And he doesn't want to be the prosecutor. She's like, well, you better do it. And I think you're not doing it for 1 second, mister. I'm not. I'm going to end that right there, and you'll be sending your toaster to be disassembled before you know it.
She gives the full-on finger wag and everything.
Oh yeah, she's like, and Picard's like, you don't have to worry us about doing our duty. You got to do yours.
Riker should have been like, you can't force me. I'm a sentient being, dude. Like, come on. It's not like I'm Data or something.
Well, if he doesn't do it, then there will be no hearing apparently, and so her ruling will just. Anyway, so it's getting heated here as we head into the hearing, the section of that. Then back in the ready room, Data meets up with Picard, and he kind of says, well, you've been declared property, but we're going to have a hearing. We're going to fight this. And, if you want somebody else to represent you, I'm good. And Data's like, I don't think there is anybody else, but I think you'd be pretty...
said so.
Yeah, but I think but even so, I think Picard would be a great choice. If there were more options to go around, even though Picard mentions that he's not very good with deciphering legal code or anything like that.
I think Guinan maybe would have been a better choice.
Perhaps, maybe in her many lives she has been a lawyer or something along those lines. Then we see Riker doing his research for the hearing, where he's looking at all the schematics. At first it's very business oriented. He's just kind of focused on the matters at hand. Drinking his cappuccino or whatever.
It also seems like a role that could fall to the counselor, maybe in a more sensible world.
Maybe, yeah. Like I could see Troy being involved in this. She was going to be sent to negotiate peace things with somebody at one point when that guy that the chorus
the deaf,
the deaf guy, yeah. So we see here Riker is looking at all the schematics of Data. We get to see kind of his like skeleton, I guess, in these schematics. And he's
what else do you need for sentience? He's got a skeleton.
He's got a skeleton,
Kevin.
Emotion?
No emotion.
He feels it in his bones.
But he can feel it. He can get drunk and feel things.
I have a thermometer back here, and it can sense the temperature. Does that make it sentient?
No.
Can it get drunk?
No.
Because sentience.
I've never tried.
Mercury's the hard stuff.
Self-awareness. Anyway, Riker gets ashamed here. And he starts to feel bad about the fact that he got excited there, that he was gonna, figure out because he's trying to put himself into this adversarial role. He's been tasked with arguing this side of the case. It's just like on Trivial Debates, guys, where sometimes you have to argue things you don't like, and Riker, but he's feeling like he's going after his friend here. If he wins, it's like lose here for Riker in this situation. We get to the hearing itself. Got Data and Picard on one side. We got Riker and Maddox on the other. Philippa. I keep wanting to call her Georgiou, but she's not Georgiou. Louvois. And then there's like a stand here in the middle. Now, there was the original series episode Court Martial, which we got to see this kind of procedure, even though this is not technically a court martial per se. And so they call Data to the stand first. Riker does. They start reading out his everything he's done, all the medals he's won, everything like that.
But it's more of a court martial than a courtroom. I mean, there's no like, there's no crime he's committed that he's being like accused of, but he's like.
Yeah, a court martial would like have a jury. It would be more of a trial.
Yeah.
And, this is more of a. It
This is
feels
more of
very
a
informal.
hearing.
It's a hearing, yeah. And all this is that Picard is challenging the ruling that she's already made, right? So that he's property and he has to submit to it, to the order. So, but Picard makes his whole service record be listed out, even though when we get to Maddox later on, he will not want to listen to Maddox's credentials. So they read this out, and then Riker does his whole spiel here, where he's like, "What are you? Who made you?" He goes, "Soong, Dr. Soong did." He goes, "What was he? A cyberneticist? More basic. A human? Exactly."
Riker's argument is awful. Like all of his points are pretty bad.
Yeah, they're really bad. Not convincing at all.
And she even said if his argument was really bad, she would just like end it all. And I think he reached that threshold of badness. He wasn't trying very hard.
He starts off with super strength. What?
He doesn't get into anything philosophical. He's just like,
no.
I can turn you off and you're strong.
I think the whole argument is meant to sort of like make him seem like a machine. He can bend a bar, Picard makes the argument that other great beings in the Federation can do this too, but
she's dumb argument.
She overrules it, so it must be a good one.
Even when he was when they were going through this, I was saying to Ashley, like, he takes his arm off, and I'm like, you can take a human's arm off. I mean, it's a bit more permanent, but
it's hard to put it back
on.
You
can put it back on in the 24th century. You can take that arm off and put it right back on. Who cares? You could beam that shit off.
You could turn a person off too. It's again a bit more permanent, but
in the 24th century, hardly.
Then he takes off his arm to show he's just, a bunch of pieces. He's not really a person. He's just a collection of circuits and neural nets, and there's no biology involved. He is not alive in that sense, in a biological sense, I guess, at least. And
I mean, Kevin's argument is better than Riker's, even though we're not buying Kevin's argument either. But it's still better than Riker's.
But Picard, I don't know. Picard seems convinced. He even will say as much later on. And then,
his instincts are bad in these early seasons. That's why.
Well, his instincts are based on whatever the writer tells him that the instincts
exactly, and they write it like. Well, you can say that with everything. You have to.
Data is a machine. He's property created by man. And the argument that Riker's making is that he has clearly been constructed by a human being, and therefore he can be turned off. He's property under this argument. Right?
The commander is a physical representation of a dream, an idea conceived of by the mind of a man. Its purpose, to serve human needs and interests. It's a collection of neural nets and heuristic algorithms. Its responses dictated by an elaborate software written by a man. Its hardware built by a man. And now a man will shut it off.
But it's a self-learning algorithm, so it's like most of the things that make up Data at this point are not things programmed into him by Noonien Soong.
There's a lot that was though, right? And so he wasn't a blank slate when he was born either.
It's just the nature versus nurture argument.
Right. Well, he's lived most of his life beyond that. He's been alive for 30-something years at this point. And then Riker finishes his argument, and then he goes, he even says, "I'm sorry" to Data before he hits his off switch.
Data should have been, "No, you're doing great. That was awful."
Well, I don't think that's the way the episode means to intend it. They may just said that this is a pretty good argument that Riker makes. It's fine if you don't think so, but Picard thinks so. Philippa thinks so.
Well, she's awful. She is truly awful at her job.
Well, Picard is willing to go on with a date with her after, so she
comes around at the end. That's good.
You got Maddox here, full. He's like, "Oh, I'm loving this. This Riker guy's great. He was a great guy for our team." And Picard's looking defeated. He asks for a recess which is granted. So then we got
When Maddox is bad at his job. This whole episode is just people being bad at their jobs.
Sure, they're all bad at their jobs, Davan. So
This
then
episode.
everyone in Starfleet.
Like Riker's putting on a bad show, and like, yeah.
Well, why do you think it's a bad show? Because you can come up with the counter argument to everything he's saying.
Well, just so basically, so easily, like super strength. Like if you know what your opponent's like takedown of your argument's going to be instantly, maybe it's a bad argument. You're like,
I don't think it's that bad of an argument. Like it's not.
So,
it's the best one I think Riker can make in his
that
case.
that he's super strong.
Well, that's just one
even though,
point.
like,
That is just one of his points. It's not his only point.
well, yeah, that point I'm talking about is being truly awful. Like he doesn't get into any philosophical.
He's
stuff,
demonstrating that he's mechanical and therefore,
Yeah.
like he's not biological, right?
He basically says he's a robot in like 5 different ways.
Right. He makes that argument. He's
And
like, what
that's
is an
the-
android? He asks him to define an android. An android's an automaton made to resemble a person.
It might have
Right.
been more effective instead of bending the bar if he had him do some like crazy complex math equation in a split second or something to
Probably.
like show that he was.
And he does
basically a
testify
calculator.
to that. He says, I can do
But there's-
60 trillion calculations a second.
Yeah,
But there's like species in the Federation and like the like the binaries and stuff.
I get that there are. You can always make that counter argument to that, but it's not. It doesn't mean that it's a bad argument.
What's a good?
like-
What's a bad argument then?
A bad argument would be like something fundamentally untrue, right? Like that he's. Oh well, he's. He. It doesn't count because I'm making it up. But
That would be a lie if it's untrue. That's different than a bad argument.
Well, I just think it's not the most convincing argument because obviously we know that Data is more than that. He's more than just property. He's more than just a machine as the viewers of the show. But but I don't think that makes Riker's argument poor. I think he's making the best argument he can. And I think that to accentuate this point, he's an automaton. He's mechanical. Yes, there are other species that could have similar strength. Maybe even species that could do 60 trillion calculations a second. I don't think so, but maybe. Like,
I mean,
The
even
binaries,
Picard
probably.
says that it's not like Picard doesn't think it's relevant because there's other species that could do that. But like,
Well, yeah.
what's her name? Louvois is the one that's like, no, I'll allow it.
I'll allow it, and maybe another judge would say, no, you're right. Like maybe they would sustain
Yeah, like-
that argument, but I don't know. A lawyer wrote this episode, so take it for what it is. And then we get Picard having the coffee. This seems like it's late at night. It seems like 10-4 is empty here with Guinan and Picard. And he was like, Riker's demonstration was devastating, he says,
Even though like you totally dissed all his points instantly, like it was like how did it? Oh,
Well,
my God.
Picard's not a
This
lawyer.
scene wasn't even in the episode to begin with. They wrote this in as an afterthought because they realized they hadn't fulfilled their contractual obligation to Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
This
She's
whole
only
scene,
she's
yeah.
only
That
in this
makes
one
sense.
scene.
Whereas the slavery thing never comes up again. It was just added for the scene after the fact. That makes sense now. The
Yeah, this is
distorted nature of that.
A great conversation where with Guinan here, where she gives her speech. Like this whole idea of disposable people. The ones you don't have to consider. And she's really talking about empathy of of humanity here, like your inability to have empathy.
Consider that in the history of many worlds, there have always been disposable creatures. They do the dirty work. They do the work that no one else wants to do because it's too difficult or too hazardous. And an army of data is all disposable. You don't have to think about their welfare. You don't think about how they feel. Whole generations of disposable people.
She just
Talking
described
about
Starfleet
slavery.
engineers. I think that's a
And red shirts.
Yeah, I was just say red
Ooh,
shirts.
well, any army commander really, who's got to send his troops into battle and whatever. But this idea of like he's like, you're talking about slavery, and she's like, oh, that's harsh, but she knows she's not, right? And even if Data doesn't have emotions, but that doesn't mean that he can't be a part of a race, right?
Yeah.
Emotions aren't
Is the Enterprise part of a race?
A
It's part
race
of
of
a
ships.
class of ships, but no. No, but it's
I think I think Guinan is the most consistent character throughout this entire series, minus the weird Q Kung Fu that never gets mentioned again. I think like her characterization is pretty good throughout the whole series. I don't think she actually, like everybody else, like Picard is so different by the end of the whole series, Riker to even Data. But like even in the early seasons, Guinan is still this. I mean, it's a stereotype. It's an absolute Hollywood trope.
She's the
wise
the
magical
mythical
black
Negro
woman,
character.
which I mean just gets worse when you add in the magical Q powers to everything. But I mean, at least they were consistent throughout the whole series. It was, it's not great, but at least they were consistent.
This creature is not what she appears to be, Picard.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
We never get an explanation for that, but whatever. Anyway, so they come back after the chat with Guinan in the recess, and Picard says, "Is Data a machine? No, we don't deny this. We too are just a machine of a biomechanical nature," which is the correct counter argument. This idea of self-determination. And then he calls Data to the stand and says, "What about these medals? Why do you have the medals, Data?" He's like, "Well, I don't know why. Is that vanity?" I guess don't worry, Kevin. He's not getting excited. It's not possible.
No, it isn't possible. And he has the medals because that's what a human would do.
So he's just it's just imitation. You're saying this
imitation.
This is just imitation. He was given a book by Picard, that he says he values, but it's just simulacra, right?
So you're saying Data is
he
the
thinks that
sincerest
someone would
form of
value that
flattery.
book.
Right. So I think
Yes.
So if you're a Riker, you would be making. He's just pretending. This is all just pretend, right? That should be the argument Riker should be making.
There's a very good reason they never mention emotions in this episode because it destroys this episode.
Because really, all of his,
few
even
things.
as a machine,
They're
all of
trying
his
to.
heuristics, like the heuristic algorithm that means like a learning algorithm. So even though they are learning, they're all going on in this positronic masterpiece that Maddox wants to get his hands on to make Data seem as emotionally present as he is when he actually isn't at all. But then the question is whether or not that negates sentience, which is where I'm having the trouble with it, which is why I love this episode. What it comes down to so much is it always made me think so much. I just didn't think that at just over 40, it's less an existential crisis than it was in 89.
Yeah, well, obviously, Data is played by a human actor who does have emotions. So it's hard for us to truly separate ourselves from that because we're going to empathize with this actor, But if he was actually just a box, like Maddox says, like with blinking lights on it, would we feel the same way?
No, he'd be the worst
A
character
better
on a
argument.
TV show ever.
Maddox should have represented himself. That's a better argument that Riker didn't get into.
I like how Orville does this concept with
Isaac.
I can't remember, with Isaac. That's his name, because he doesn't have that. He doesn't have a face. He doesn't have the face, so he still looks like an anthropod like we do, but he doesn't have the face. So I found it like I never emotionally connected with Isaac as a character. Like his arcs were interesting, but I connected with the way that his character affected other people's emotions.
Right.
Because he wasn't. He
and that's
didn't
a good
have
point.
those human
Yeah.
aspects.
Because Isaac
even
is
like
completely
when they put
covered.
when they put the special, like the Mr. Special Potato Head, the Mr. Potato Head pieces on him, just to illustrate the fact like he doesn't have the face, even with that joke, to add the eyebrows and that to like his emotions and stuff. So like Kevin's right. Like I never.
They have
if we were
one
having this
emotion.
argument
It's
about
when their
Isaac-
head opens up and guns come out of it. Then that's when they know they're
Yeah,
upset.
then that's just emotion to murder.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I would definitely probably not feel as conflicted about the themes of this episode if Data did look like Isaac, and just even Isaac's eyes. I think he states in an episode that they're there, that he doesn't actually see out of them. They're just there because it makes people more comfortable.
It was kind of installed by their builders from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? To fake it, but they still like, at least in the case of those androids, I guess they are, right, the Kalon, they can feel pain at least, right? So that's something.
They have pain receptors.
And we find out that they can feel emotion with some programming. Anyway, so the whole thing here with Tasha, the fact that Data and Tasha got it on back in the Naked Now, is acknowledged, and that seems to really change the courtroom vibe quite a bit. Because how could a being without emotions get down with a fine lady like Tasha Yar?
Wait a minute.
You know, Kevin, there's one thing we know from Debate 9, that there's nothing you hate more than a speciest argument.
That's right.
So I figure all this talk about the measure of a man, that's kind of speciest. What about the measure of a chicken?
Also,
Does that have value?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right now, an incredible amount of value.
Pet value, yes.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Flying away.
fly away.
I'll be back.
Okay, so there's this whole part of the episode where Maddox takes the stand as a hostile witness, as Picard says. Like, this is a hostile witness, so I'm going to, you know, and then he said, now, this whole argument of sentience, which I've believed for the last 30-something years, Kevin, and now you've torn it all down, because I've never bothered to look up the definition until this moment. But, so, yes, based on the definition, not just your definition, the definition.
The themes of this
21st
episode
century.
still stand, and the lessons still stand, and it's still great. I'm being very technical.
Well, but this is a technical procedure, this courtroom, right? And, you know, and he said, you know, so he gets Maddox to define sentience as self-awareness, intelligence, and consciousness, not in that order. And, you know, and he is like, well, is Data intelligent? He immediately says yes. Data is intelligent enough to meet that criteria. So, you know, they say, is he self-aware? And he goes, Data, where are you? He's like, I'm in a courtroom, discerning my right to self-determination. Seems pretty self-aware to me. And then consciousness is the third one. Now, consciousness, I think, is that, I guess, as Justin's been explaining, is the most like
Kind of
abstract,
nebulous.
nebulous thing that is, it's more of a philosophical opinion, right? And how that all comes down. But this sort of like stream of content, a mental state, a mental process, even, you know, is sort of like the idea of consciousness. Like, if I can fantasize, I can come up with a plan to do something or not do something, you know, all those things are or change my mind, you know. That's, I think that's kind of this idea of consciousness, which obviously is not just, you know, that criteria is not specific to like just humans, but that, so based on that definition, that's why I was like, well, dogs are not intelligent enough to be considered sentient under what I thought this was. But obviously they can feel and they can experience sensations, and they are intelligent. They're more intelligent than like a fish, but like they're not as intelligent to, like, you know, write a symphony or something like that.
I think some country, I might be wrong on this, but I think some country did grant personhood to some of the great apes. Or at least that was a big question a few years ago somewhere,
right?
About some primates' personhood. I can't remember.
Right, and like, and if there's any like poaching of apes, you know, chimpanzees or whatever, is that just murder, straight up murder, you know, at that point, right? And versus just, you know, I guess the other definition would be cruelty to animals, you know, and how you kind of draw that line. But Data's not an animal, but you know, it's kind of being. This argument is kind of in the same vein of that, almost that, right? Is like sort of where, you know, when do you determine that a being has rights, has the right to self-determination, has the right to freedom, individuality, self-expression, you know? I think a big answer for me is like when a being has the ability to ask for those things, you know, or to express those things.
Language?
Language, I think, is part of it. You know, like, you know, it could be sign language. It could be a lot of things. It doesn't have to be verbal language, but, you know, some ability of communication. Like obviously dolphins use like their sonar communications and things like that. And we know that they're very intelligent in terms of being able to solve math problems and things of that nature.
I mean, I think every animal, even bugs and like ants, that communicate with each other. Octopus, some sort of language. That they
Right.
have.
Right, but we wouldn't see. But they couldn't explain the internet to me or something like that, right? Like
Neither could most people. That's what I'm saying. We're giving way too many credit to humans. Way too much credit.
I think you give a lot of credit to animals too, but that's I think that's just how you are.
No, it's because the more science that's done on the study of intelligence in animals keeps debunking all the things people used to think about the intelligence of animals. They're always smarter, and they all feel way more than we thought they did.
I don't think you
all
should
of them.
believe in any of this. Just embrace entropy. That's the only thing that matters.
I tend to agree
I'm
with
sick of
Davan.
your
Davan.
friggin' Thanos attitude, buddy.
Well,
Like Dave, when you mentioned
Apathy is boring.
when you mentioned them
We're
wanting
here to
to
entertain.
give personhood or rights to some of the great apes, I actually think that's a great idea.
Mhm.
It's not a hard line, like it's more of a feeling, but you watch them. They're like people. Like they have the full range of
Right. Well, the fact that
feelings
they're
and
so closely
connection
related to
and-
us, and we can read their faces, compared to another animal that we might
Look at
not
a
be able
cat.
to do.
Well,
that
I think that goes farther. That probably goes farther down the line than we think.
with. Yeah. And and it's a really a question about who we are as humans, right? And how we decide to define these things. We all have different definitions. Even the four people here kind of look at this a little differently.
There was
Yeah.
it was very, and I think even parts of the world, I'm not sure whether this is common everywhere, but I'm fairly certain that science proved that fish feel pain at this point. But when I was a kid,
course.
it was genuinely accepted, like common knowledge, that fish just don't feel like I
As
was
a
told that by
fisherman, I can
teachers.
tell
I was
you
told that
fish
by
feel pain.
by everybody, but I've never been comfortable with fishing because I don't like
what
stabbing
about
dogs
plants? Do plants
through
feel
the
pain?
worms.
Yes,
According to
actually.
some
And plants-
very crunchy people, plants do feel they release chemicals when you cut them, and there are
They warn other plants.
responses. You can hook up one of those sensors to them, and they will give off readings, and there are some weird studies that people have done with
Yeah.
plants.
Trees,
know how you
Every
trees
time we
trees get
study any living
lonely.
being, it's smarter than we think it
And
is.
and
Whatever
and
that
if
tells
Trees
you.
Mark
get
Wahlberg
lonely
has
in the
taught us
city.
anything,
Yep, trees get lonely.
yeah, and they're gonna
They-
get angry.
They talk.
Mark Wahlberg
They
taught me
talk
that.
across mycelial networks in the forest.
When you start to mow your lawn, your grass starts to warn the other grass that your lawnmower is coming.
Yeah, the chemical it releases the other grass senses the release of the chemical. I was reading
it
about
goes
this like
into
a couple
goes
days
into a
ago
more
about how
dormant stage.
mycelial
All right,
networks
all
and
right,
like plants,
you hippies.
trees
We're
whispering
gonna
to
move
one
this
another.
along. All right,
The fucking Lorax over here.
yeah.
Dave's
So
getting uncomfortable with all this science.
yeah. All right. Well, then we get Picard basically berates Maddox here in his final argument to really just kind of drive this home and win this thing for take it.
A single date is a curiosity, a wonder even, but thousands of datas. Isn't that becoming a race? And won't we be judged by how we treat that race? Now tell me, Commander, what is data? I don't understand.
What is he? A machine. Is he? Are you sure? Yes. You see, he's met 2 of your 3 criteria for sentience, so what if he meets the 3rd? Consciousness in even the smallest degree. What is he then? I don't know. Do you?
Do you?
Do you?
Do you? You should have looked at the audience. Do you?
Do you? Well, we have.
Also-
Rick right there.
What does Maddox know about being sentient? Like, this is not his
Right,
field
he's
of
not. That's
expertise.
not his area of expertise. He's an expert in cybernetics.
Yes.
But that's not what he's being asked to answer here, right? So Riker really should be objecting and say, "Can he ask him a relevant question?" But Riker's heart's not in it. But
No.
Philippa doesn't really know or doesn't decide to scorn him for that. So anyway, so then she goes, "Hey, well, like Starfleet's mission was to seek out new life. Well, there it sits. So hey, you want to make a good law? Want to make law out here, make it a good one, right? So then Philippa doesn't even need to deliberate. She's like, I don't know. I'm looking at that Data sitting there, and I don't know what he is. Is he really there, or is he just an imitation? Not really sure.
She's falling for the blinking thing. She wouldn't have a problem with a fish because they don't blink. She's just looking at Data like blink over there, and she's like, it's blinking at me.
Right. So she decides, Data is not the property of Starfleet under this criteria. Therefore, Data has the right to refuse the procedure. And that is the end of the hearing, right? So we got a break there, and they've won. So then we get this final moment here in the episode.
No. He's not the property of Starfleet, so he can resign.
He can resign, but Maddox is not going to force his hand into resignation, basically. So he can't. So the transfer is still legal as long as he's a member of Starfleet.
But couldn't be forced. He's not going to transfer him because he can't be forced to take part in the.
Right.
Yeah.
He can get him transferred, but not forced to do with the procedure.
Yes.
Right. So and then Data's like, I find what you're kind of doing intriguing. So when I think you're ready, I'm still going to work with you. I this isn't personal, really.
Of course it's not.
Data's like, I like how much you think about me, Maddox. Is that vanity?
Is that vanity? And then Maddox gets confronted after by Philippa, who's, he says, well, he's a remarkable being. And Philippa remarks how, he doesn't refer to Data as it, here, that Maddox has sort of a
fully
turning point.
functional.
He's fully functional. He's like, he had sex. I just found this out minutes ago, and this changes everything about my plans for making a whole race of androids.
Given the way he was looking at Data earlier, I would be more concerned about Maddox disassembling me while I was offline at this point.
Yeah, have that on camera. Have somebody else in the room.
So we get this final moment here between Picard and Philippa, where she's like, dinner tonight, you buying? She says. He's like, oh yes, even though there's no money, where I'm buying. All right, you know what that means.
Yeah.
And she walks out and he goes, I liked her better before the grandma hair.
It is quite a haircut.
Yeah. Here you go.
It's literally my
so,
grandmother's hair.
There's this final scene here where Riker is brooding in the observation lounge. Data comes to find him and says, "You're missing the party. We're having a party." And he's like, "I have no right to be there, Data. I nearly won. I made so many great arguments. Davan didn't think so, but I made some great arguments." And
This is a bit phony. Like, I don't think it's with Riker's character to think that way. Like, I think,
for him to
he would have to think so little of his crewmates to think that they would think that of him. Like, he's supposed to be the people guy, the guy who understands his crewmates and stuff. Like, I don't know. He's real broody. You're right about that. Real broody, and it doesn't make a lot of sense.
I just feel like there should be like dashboard confessionals, screaming infidelities playing softly in the background of this episode on the acoustic guitar. Just in this scene, maybe.
Yeah.
Data
says, well, like,
this,
like, you had to do it. You had no
Riker's
choice. You had to do that job. So you really, and even though it hurt you to do it, you did it. So I won't forget that.
I love that line. That's a good line. But
Data likes, and Riker likes that line. He's like, "You're right. I will come to the party. I just needed a little bit of forgiveness to clear my conscience here." So they head off to the party, and that is the end of the episode. Only took us an hour to rip through all that. So
I wanted to see the episode end with Maddox walking out, and then Picard saying, "Mr. Worf is going to escort you back to your shuttle," and then Worf would just like, "Come with me," and then it cuts to the end of the episode, and I can imagine what happens after that.
he can also bend a metal rod.
Okay, let's get into our trivia and anything we might not know about this yet. Also, I saw that Heather commented earlier that she was a fan of that Admiral's uniform.
I like everything except for the accent on the arms. because I feel like that ribbon of Romulan material across here went down and curled oddly across the back of the sleeves and then came down across the front.
It almost works for me, but those rank bars are unforgivable.
I liked it from afar. It was atrocious close up.
Close up, yeah. So as we mentioned, Melinda Snodgrass got this, wrote this episode, a former lawyer. You know, this was kind of written during the strike, the Writer Guild of America strike, and consequently, you know, needed to use existing scripts. So that's kind of how this got put out there, because she wasn't a regular member of the writing team at that point. She says, everyone seems to view the episode as a Data script, but it's really a Picard script. Data is the catalyst, but the stress is all on Picard. I agree with that. And she also recalled how Gene Roddenberry nearly shot down the story. As to the issue of law in Gene's vision. So in Gene's vision, he nearly killed this episode because, according to Gene, there were no lawyers in the 24th century because if people had criminal intentions, they had their minds made right. She says, I found that chilling. So
Star Trek was more or less saved from Gene.
Yeah. Like,
same with boobs and like
good
weird
bones.
Yeah.
And I want to stress the word bone.
So she says, I pointed out to them that you have contracts that have to be negotiated and conflicts of law between different legal systems and divorces, et cetera, et cetera. There was no way that there would be no lawyers in the future. And I guess Gene Roddenberry was like, I guess. So
he thought there would be no problems in the future except captains of starships would punch people all the goddamn time. Like there's no problems in the future, but there's always a reason to give someone a knuckle sandwich. That was his view of the future.
50% bad morals, but nothing wrong. And
nothing.
Captain Louvois' office was built on stage 9 in a space across the corridor from the transporter room where swing sets were commonly built. The space was last seen as a lounge in the outrageous Akona. Oh, that's right. Okay. And some elements of that room were retained. A temporary wall was built outside the office door in the middle of the corridor, set to block the standing corridor wall. The Starbase restaurant was a new set built on stage 16 that contained the series Planet Hell cave set. The computer room in which Riker researches data for his prosecution is a mild redress of the medical lab set. Yeah, I didn't really recognize that set. And so the courtroom set was a redress of the TOS movie bridge set that was first served as the TNG battle bridge as well. A couple more things here, everybody. The Daystrom Institute, first mentioned here, was a homage to the character of Richard Daystrom from the original series episode, The Ultimate Computer. Okay, so, and we'll see the Daystrom Institute gets referenced quite a bit more after this. Data's rights as a sentient being would again be a challenge a season later in the episode The Offspring. There, the issue was whether Data could assert parental rights over his daughter, Lal. In both episodes, Picard asks as Data's advocate. Admiral Nakamura tells Picard that Starbase 173 has been established in response to the disturbances along the Federation Romulan neutral zone, which were first referenced in the episode The Neutral Zone. These disturbances will later be revealed to be early attacks by the Borg.
I feel like we see Nakamura like 10 times. You sure it's not like 10 times?
I think it's just twice. Yeah. This
like
episode
not even
features
on screens, like even on like
he might get maybe in dialogue. I could see his name being put in dialogue maybe. This episode features the rare interim pattern Starfleet Admiral uniform, which was only seen twice in the second season of TNG. The uniform departed from the first season Pip Triangle Admiral insignia and introduced the pipped box version, which was the standard Admiral insignia for the rest of the Next Generation and all subsequent series. The second season Pip insignia was worn vertical, while later seasons showed the insignia flat against the collar, and that's why I like it better. The rest
him in the throat.
Yeah, the restoration of the scene mentioning Picard's service aboard the USS Reliant means that he and Pavel Chekhov each served on a starship named Reliant and two starships named Enterprise. Interesting coincidence. Unknown to Dr. Maddox at the time, other examples of Soong-type androids were available, such as Lore, B4, and the 2 other prototypes. Data's head, later discovered in Time Zero.
They didn't know about that stuff.
And Juliana Tainer. Also, Dr. Noonium Soong himself
they
was
didn't
still...
know about her yet either, though.
No, they didn't know about that either.
No.
Dr. Noonium Soong himself was still alive during the events of this episode. Maddox will
True.
eventually meet and work with Dr. Soong's natural son, Alton Soong, to continue his research project. That's right. And then, Maddox comes back in Picard just to get killed by Girardi. Not played by the same actor. Some new guy played him in that, in that time. But it seems like that Maddox goes more good over the course of his life, less of this evil guy we kind of meet in this episode.
Yeah,
Less punchable face. Yeah. No tears were shed.
No
tears were shed. There was a significant amount of original footage was cut from this episode during editing, but was restored for the TNG Season 2 Blu-ray. The extended edition features a 57-minute version of the episode containing approximately 13 minutes of restored scenes and visual effects, including... in the first act, we got Picard, Nakamura, and Maddox beam aboard the Enterprise. Picard and Nakamura reminisce about their days aboard the Reliant. We missed all that. Picard confronts Nakamura about Data's transfer by the way of his ready room desktop monitor. Picard presents LaForge with his Sherlock Holmes pipe and engineering. They discuss life outside of Starfleet. There was an extended version of Data's farewell party in 10 Forward. Pulaski gives Data advice on where to live after leaving Starfleet. Riker and Troy privately discuss their feelings about Data. Maddox crashes the party and insults Data. And Picard summons Riker to the transporter room. There was also a scene where Riker interrupts the fencing match between Picard and his fencing partner. Riker warns Picard that
scenes?
there was a fencing scene. Yeah. Riker warns Picard that he will do everything in his power to win this coming legal battle, and Picard warns Riker that he will do the same. Oh, that would have been fun to keep in the episode.
So all those 13 minutes and none of it was courtroom stuff?
Yeah. So far, there's more.
No wonder they cut it all. Oh, there's more.
There's a scene where Picard and Data review their legal strategy. Picard attempts to guide Data's testimony in a more favorable position, calling it a bit of legal fiction. And Data cites "Kill all the lawyers" from Shakespeare's Henry VI, Part 2. And I think I'm almost there. And the last thing was an extended version of Data and Riker's post-hearing conversation in the observation lounge, where Data tells Will that he has learned from Riker's sacrifice in prosecuting his friend. So all that, I don't know, all that got left on the editing room floor, guys. Are you missing any of that?
No.
I think just that fencing scene I would have liked, where Riker's like, I'm going to do everything I can. You better watch out. I'm a hell of a lawyer sometimes.
I'd watch Picard and Nakamura reminisce.
That would have been all right too, yeah. But that's it for the episode, guys. In terms of our trivia and our summary. But now we're going to rate this episode. Now, as I've mentioned, Justin and Davan have already submitted ratings of 11s. Are you leaving your ratings there, guys?
No, not.
My 11 will stand. It's still my favorite, warts and all.
It's not my favorite. I can think of like a bunch of TNG episodes off the top of my head that I think are more deserving of an 11 than this one. Like The Wounded, for example, I like a lot better than this one upon rewatch. And I think it's less plot holes. It was a lot. I'll still give it a 10, but like...
Okay, taking it down to a 10. All right.
Yeah. But like,
Kevin?
Man, TNG, even when it's great, can still be a little frustrating.
I still like this a lot. The lessons still stand, even though I'm being very technical. I would give this a 9. Still an excellent episode.
9. Yeah, I like this just as much as last week's episode, if not more. So I'm comfortable with a 10 on this one. It's everything I wanted in an episode, even if they weren't, super technical in their legal interpretations and everything else. So we're averaging a 10, everybody. Kevin's 9, Justin's 11. They meet up at 10, and David and I both give 10. So it's a perfect episode, everyone, even though it's got warts.
Whoa, are we going to call it a perfect episode? Don't make me lower it to a 9. It was far from perfect.
It's a far from perfect episode that happens to have a rating of 10, Davin. So we'll leave it there.
I like that better.
Our next
asterisk for TNG early seasons.
Yes, exactly.
okay.
It's perfect for season 2. How about that? A 10 from Heather. Thank you, Heather. Well, we have another episode coming up in a week's time here on Live Long and Podcast. Our next edition of Star Trek, the Next Generation review, will be The Dauphin, season 2, episode 10.
The Dauphin?
I don't think this will be getting 10s. I'm just putting that out there now as a prediction. So
mine's gonna be low for this one. This one is one of the ones I think of when I think of bad TNG.
Yeah, me too. So we have Jody and Heather set to be on the panel next week. Still have one spot open, and we'll be breaking all that down in a week's time or so. So, but I don't remember loving that episode myself. It's one of my. And then we have Contagion after that, and then The Royale is coming.
The only good Wesley romance episode is the Traveler episode.
Not even the one where he's with Ashley Judd or whatever, and they're running from the
game.
So out
the
of
Game. I like The Game.
Yeah. He doesn't get a ton of romance in his storylines. They're just the Traveler. So anyway,
Yes.
with all that said,
viewers, find yourself someone out there that looks at you the way the Traveler looks at Wesley Crusher.
Right, or the way Maddox
And-
looks at Data.
Or the way
Then
that
get
Wesley
yourself a
looks at
restraining order.
everybody.
Yes, yeah.
The way Wesley looks at Mendoc from last episode or whatever.
I am not Mordock. I am
Yeah.
Mendon. Yeah, well, this is true. I wonder what happened, what became of him. Anyway, everyone, we're got the next episode of Next Generation. Also on Saturday, I'm going to be doing an interview here on Live Long and Podcast with Sean Farrick from WhatCulture.com, TrekCulture.com, getting all into him, with what he's been up to on that channel and just how he, got started and his story and getting to know him more on the air. So that should be fun. Look out for that. I think it'll be Saturday morning, our time.
I should have worn my my Trek Culture T-shirt today to celebrate that, dude. Should have dug that out.
Yes, coming Ireland's own. Also, we are almost done the Orville, or at least up until the end of season 3. We'll be dealing with the season 3 finale on Monday. And we're going to see if there's any more after that, if there's season 4 or not, but it could be the end of it. So look out, Kevin, Jody, and Adam and I will be on for that. And then we're transitioning to For All Mankind will be the show that will be taking the Monday night slot after that. So we'll be breaking down those episodes. Anything else, guys, we wanted to promote? I think Trivial Debates is, I'll be on that on Sunday. We're doing a reboot episode.
Incoming game.
Yeah, incoming game. Yeah, all that from YTV's own. It's been a while since I've watched it, so I need to kind of familiarize myself again with it. But I loved the show back in the day.
Check out our X-Men 97 retrospective in season 2 look ahead we did over on X-Rated on Tuesday.
Nice.
We had a lot of fun over there on Tuesday. That was a good time.
Yeah, it seemed like you guys were having a good time. Right now we're doing Survivor. If you like Survivor, check that out on Super Mater Brothers every Wednesday. And I think those are all the points. So thanks for being with us. Thanks for this later night, guys. And we'll leave you with a quote before we sign off for tonight. Have a good one.
Your Honor, Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, there it sits, waiting. You wanted a chance to make law. Well, here it is. Make it a good one.
See you next time, everyone.
But it doesn't feel...
Beam up some Star Trek content with Live Long and Podcast. Tune in to X-Rated, the X-Men animated review show. Artistic interviews with graphic histories. A roundtable movie discussion with Hey, did you see this one? And movie reviews with Hold Up, a movie podcast. And while you're at it, spin a few records with Eamon on Track. Watch us duke it out on Trivial Debates. And let's chat about TV with the Super Mater Brothers. It's all here on the United Federation of Podcasts.